Okay, so I think
Perfect.
we already have some people joining us. Good morning to those who have joined through. Quite a
Hi,
good start
everyone.
already.
Yeah, lovely to have you here. We've got a few more minutes, so if you want to run and grab a cup of tea, then there's still time. We'll be starting just in a few minutes.
I can see we've got some people using the question and answer box as well, so that's fantastic. We've got some people who are familiar with how GoToWebinar works. So yes, please, if you have questions or comments throughout the webinar today, please feel free to submit your comments through.
Yeah, it's really nice to hear from you on these webinars when you can't see people. So lovely to have your comments in throughout, and we'll be keeping an eye on the question box as well.
We'll start with a bit of a soft launch in a few moments, and I think it's nice to focus on that question that we have on the screen about what motivates you at work. Emily and myself, we'll talk a little bit about that while people are joining the webinar. To our guests that have joined nice and early, if you have some thoughts that you'd like to share, some ideas about what motivates you at work, what do you find motivating, what do you find engaging, what gives you energy, please feel free to share your thoughts on the questions and answers.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I was, we were talking just now, weren't we, Dane, about how I've just had a couple of weeks off work, so it's a very timely subject for me to think about motivation and how to start thinking about sort of how to get back into it after 2 weeks off and what motivates me. So I've been thinking a bit about this today.
Yes, quite a pertinent question there. By design, maybe. We've had a question as well from one of our attendees about whether we're having text captions for this webinar. We don't have text captions live, but all of our webinars are recorded and they are put on the Bailey and French YouTube page, and they will have closed captioning available. So please keep an eye out for the recording when it goes live, and you'll be able to see those closed captions. Thank you for asking that question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And if you have any other questions before we start or throughout today as well, please do pop them in the question box, and we'll keep an eye on those as well.
I think it's quite an apt question for us to be thinking about performance motivation on such a miserable rainy day here in Brighton in the UK. It just makes it a little bit harder when we're supposed to be enjoying the throes of summer, and most people are walking around the office in jumpers.
I know, you wouldn't think it's August next week, would you?
I know. For those who have joined, let us know where you're joining in from. Are you based in the UK this afternoon, or are you joining us from our worldwide audience? I'll be keen to see the population where you're from.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that it's going to clear up a bit, because I've been craving a summer barbecue. So I'm hoping that this weekend's going to be a bit nicer, but I don't have much much trust in this weather at the moment.
I know. I just had comments saying, I hope the rain stays where it is and well away from the oval. Yes, indeed.
Got someone joining from the Cotswolds as well. Apparently it's a bit grey and wet there as well. Oh no.
Although you've just come back from a holiday abroad, I believe, Emily, and you had sort of similarly rainy weather as well.
Yeah, yes, yeah. was in Thailand, and thinking I was going to go over for 2 weeks of full sun, it was actually really rainy and grey as well. So there's something going on at the moment.
Yeah, yes, indeed. So for those who are still joining, welcome. It's great to have you here. We're just soaking up a few more minutes before we start the webinar with formal introductions. But I think maybe it's time for that soft launch, Emily. That question on the screen where we're asking our audience and of ourselves about what motivates you at work. So if you'd like to share what motivates you, please feel welcome. It's great to have your engagement and collaboration through these sessions. If I asked you, Emily, what motivates you at work, what springs to mind for you?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I have been thinking about it this morning, as I mentioned. I think mostly a couple of things, but mainly I think coming in, this morning to the office with everyone there, working within sort of a buzzy environment within a team definitely is a motivation for me. Being able to sort of bounce ideas off of people and being collaborative with others, and also receive support as well where needed. That motivates me. I think if I struggle personally, sort of. If I was working from home on my own, I think it's nicer for me to be around people. So that's definitely a big motivation, just the people around me, really.
Yes, absolutely. People can have such an energizing impact, and it's so important. It's the core of what we do, right? Humanizing the world of work at Bailey and French. So it's no surprise that we're people. For me, I would say it's a similar kind of scenario. Working alongside others, but getting that diversity of thought, people of different styles and attributes and ways of working and thinking. That to me is really motivating. And I can think of a time, actually, a specific example. I'm working in an organization where we had an opportunity to create, I guess, a talent and performance framework for a business, almost from the ground up. And for me, that was one of the most motivating projects that I worked on, because not only did it allow me to leverage, I guess, my skill set as a business psychologist, but working as part of a team, we had a whole variety of people that were sort of all aligned to that one objective. So we had people who were like the completer finishers, thinking about we've got to get this across the line. People that were really organized and structured, and then people on the other side of the scale, which were really philosophical and blue sky thinkers, and sort of working in amongst that. It was so energizing. Could have done that activity for days in that project, because it was just so engaging. And it's that time where you just feel time stops, because you're in flow and everything is just moving really, really quickly. For me, that's probably one of the key motivating projects.
Yeah, I love that example. And please feel free to pop in the question box as well your own answer to this question. I've seen that we've got a comment in saying that praise is always nice, and I think I really relate to that as well, where actually you're working on something sort of really hard or for a long time, and actually being recognized for that accomplishment and receiving praise, or even any feedback in whatever sort of form that's in, is a huge motivation for me. And just sort of receiving that sort of validates what you're doing and motivates you to continue. So yeah, that was a great one. Thank you for commenting that.
Recognition and appreciation, I think, is really, really important. People are seen and valued for what they contribute. So thank you for that. I think maybe now it's probably good for us to start with the formal introductions as we move on to the next slide. I think we've got a good uptick of numbers. They're still joining us, but I think we should start. Thank you, everybody, for spending the time with us this afternoon. I'm Dr. Dane Poboka. I lead the learning and recruitment teams here at Bailey and French, and I'm delighted to be joined on the webinar this afternoon by Emily Murton. So Emily, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Dane. So my name's Emily. I'm one of the learning consultants at Bailey and French. My background is also occupational psychology, so my role sort of falls around the design of our solutions and how we can use positive psychology to help our clients. So yeah, that's me.
Yes, yes, you have two psychologists today on the webinar, so looking forward to really diving into this topic. And many of you perhaps will have seen us in our live sessions, or you might have attended an event in the past, downloaded some content from our website. You might have even joined one of these webinars before and heard Emily's or my voice in the past. So at Bailey and French, we're all about humanizing the world of work. And for us, that is across the entire employee life cycle, all the way from recruitment through to onboarding, training, leadership development, well-being, ED&I, performance motivation, which is obviously what we're talking about today, and retention. So we've got a lot within our scope and remit here, but everything that we do is underpinned by human strengths and positive psychology to make sure that we deliver sustainable impact. So thank you once again for joining us, and for now it's on to the topic that we're discussing today, and we're going to start off with some great research by McKinsey, I believe. Oh, sorry, Gallup.
It was going to be one of the two,
Yes.
wasn't it?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, we thought we'd just start off with sort of this quite, I guess for me it's quite shocking actually, but a statement by Gallup in this year where it says only 2 in 10 employees say their performance is managed in a way that motivates them to do outstanding work. I think this kind of just sets the scene really that performance motivation is something that people are definitely recognizing, but there's a long way to go, and hence why we're talking about it today. And we are really wanting to advocate it because motivation is such a key part to performance at work, and it's so important that people are focusing on this today, especially when we're facing lots of different challenges that we perhaps haven't done so before. So yeah, to me this statement sort of really stood out.
Yes. And it's one of those things that you know, having successful performance motivation is really about creating a cultural shift in how people work. You know, what we're talking about is moving from performance management, I guess, to performance motivation, and that's, you know, requiring managers, but even I guess colleagues to some degree, is, you know, to think of themselves as coaches, you know, not necessarily bosses, and you know, looking at how do we bring people along in a different way to make sure that we can put our arms around all of the individuals and make sure that they're motivated to want to engage and give their best, rather than sort of managing them to a KPI or a performance standard.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really sort of those traditional systems around sort of KPIs and maybe annual reviews, things like that. They're just sort of not enough nowadays. I think that human element is so important. So yeah, hopefully this statement sort of captures that. So yeah, we're talking about performance motivation today, and you know, as I've said, sort of the traditional performance reviews and conversations, maybe every year or every 6 months. I think people, I don't know about you, Dane, but I get the feel that I think people tend to actually dread those conversations because they can have a bit of a stigma behind them when they're not very often. Those sort of performance management motivations can be quite scary. So it's around, you know, how can we change our approach to really help people to want to talk about performance and own their steps that they're going to take next, and really take accountability for that.
Yes, absolutely. And you know, I like the point that you mentioned around, performance appraisals. That's often seen as a process, and sometimes it's just done annually. And to motivate people, to engage people, that's not something that happens once a year in a 90-minute formal conversation. This is something that you live and breathe and do every day, and it's about, I think, helping people identify those 3 points here on the slide around autonomy, mastery, and purpose. These are really key in helping them take those steps into embracing and fully engaging in their work, in their purpose, in what they do. And for today in the webinar, I think it's really important that we're obviously going to talk about the concepts of performance motivation, but we're also going to share with you some really practical tips and suggestions. So you've got some key takeaways that you can go and start applying or taking back into the workplace. So we will spend a bit of time this morning thinking about the concept, but we definitely want to make sure that our audience and you as viewers have something really concrete to take away towards the end. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think, when we're talking about the intrinsic motivation, we're really talking about keeping people switched on and keeping them engaged. And there's obviously lots of reasons and research as to why people stay in roles and why people leave their jobs. And a lot of it does come back to that intrinsic sense of feeling. So of course, there's importance in things like reward and pay, but it's often down to other things like their line manager and the leadership style within an organization, the team that they're within, and how they have opportunities to contribute. It's that kind of those kinds of elements that gives that satisfaction, often above and beyond monetary aspects. And again, it speaks to the core of our approach at Bailey & French. What we do is based on positive psychology theories backed by big data and scientific evidence. So I guess, it's a good time to now think about how we can take our philosophy and start to apply it specifically to motivating performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's really key is what you just said in terms of it's that intrinsic drive, that drive motivation from within us, not necessarily those external factors, like as you said, the financial reward, maybe company benefits that come with that. But what we really want to do is boost that intrinsic motivation and, encourage people to really want to be motivated and through gaining autonomy, mastery, and purpose, as you've mentioned. So these are all really, really important aspects to consider when talking about performance motivation here. Shall I move on to the next slide, Dane?
That sounds perfect, yes.
Brilliant. So we've talked a bit about the need to shift towards motivating performance rather than sort of managing it with these traditional approaches, and we've come up with a few sort of points that can help do that, can help make that shift. So the first one looks at changing the tone, and we talk about strengths a lot at Bailey & French. If you're familiar with us, this word will come up quite a bit today. But we can change the tone to focus on individual strengths, and this really helps with motivating performance. And as a reminder, those strengths are things that we find energizing and enjoyable and are natural to us. And when we focus on this, that naturally creates a really positive and engaging environment for conversations to focus on our unique strengths. And when we do that, people naturally, they light up, they feel inspired, they think more creatively, and they'll become a lot more motivated as well. And that sets the tone for actually more open and honest conversations and relationships as well. So there's a huge sort of ripple effect of using and focusing on unique strengths. The second one is motivating employees to take accountability. So I've sort of touched on this briefly, but we want to really encourage people to take ownership and take accountability at work. And when we feel our colleagues know and value us at our best, that really is a motivator, and we want to own our next steps. Performance is, I think, sort of about learning and growth, and continuing growth as well. So that's a really key point when thinking about motivation in terms of performance. And then the last one was making feedback effective. And I guess this touches on the notion of strength again, but more specifically around having those feedback conversations, using that strengths-based language around reaching potential. When we do that, the feedback that we're giving becomes a lot easier and more constructive as well. And individuals are able to receive feedback in a more positive way that motivates them. And this is much more likely to be better received and implemented going forward. So there is a huge impact of using that strengths-based feedback when having those conversations.
And I think it's important, that these concepts, it's really about how we're changing our approach up front, to try to encourage people to be, more willing and want to talk about performance and own it, see their own sort of autonomy in that process, their own sense of agency. Again, shifting beyond performance management processes, but having something that somebody can actually engage and buy into. So, when you think about traditional performance management, it focuses on developing areas of weaknesses, focusing on what's wrong or where you're perhaps not meeting the grade or the benchmark. And, that has actually proven to decrease performance in motivation. So we know that by making some of these adjustments to our approach up front, and, even just focusing on these three areas, we will better set that direction towards performance motivation and start to see those positive impacts as a result.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just noticed a question in the question box. Dane, I wonder if I should perhaps read this out to you or pose it to you, but it mentions about replacing, it says the questions, I see you've replaced the relatedness aspect of the social SDT theory to purpose. Is there some more context around why purpose is more important than relatedness? Did you have any sort of thoughts on that, Dane, at all? I don't know if you can see that.
Yes, that's brilliant. So SDT theories is self-determination theory, and the relatedness aspect is really is kind of like creating that feeling to belong, I guess, with others. So for us, it's kind of a yes and, of course, relatedness is absolutely important, but I think stripping it back to taking a step before that, and really understanding about what your purpose is, that sense of self, the understanding your own strengths, really knowing, even from an emotional intelligence perspective, really understanding yourself as a person and that purpose can help you understand what is going to energize you, what fires you up, what keeps your human switched on in the workplace. And once you have that, these are key foundational steps towards building that relatedness and building out the connections to others, understanding others, and role modeling. But it's almost like stripping it right back to that sense of purpose and identity. We don't necessarily separate that from work and life. We are wrapped up as individuals in that sense of identity, and those who are understanding their sense of purpose, their personal brand, their strengths, are certainly in a much stronger place, I think, to be able to build on those motivational elements and seek them out if they're not there for them, or at least understand what they need to keep that switched on. Emily, I don't know if you had anything to build on that as well. It's a really good question from our audience. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I don't think I have anything to add. I thought it was a really interesting question, so I wanted to make sure that I got to it now. But no, I wouldn't add anything to that. I thought that was that sort of was a good answer. So thank you for tipping in there. Perfect. So we know by sort of making some adjustments to our approach and focusing on even, just these 3 areas. And this is not an exhaustive list. Obviously, there's lots of other things we can be doing to shift sort of that performance management approach to more of a motivation approach. But we wanted to just outline a few initial thoughts there. So hopefully that's been helpful. And these 3 sort of ideas will set that direction towards performance motivation and see a more positive impact as a result. So we also wanted to outline a few of the benefits to performance motivation, again, sort of linking it to strengths, because at Bailey and French, we are all about human strengths and how to use them at work. So I will just briefly sort of chat through a few of the benefits that we've identified for sort of taking a performance motivation approach. And the first one very much looks at sort of the use of strengths and using that strengths-based approach to performance, which enables more positive conversations that actually people will want to have. As those conversations can be difficult, people do tend to dread performance conversations, but if they use that different tone, if they are focusing on strengths and really what energizes people and how can they, craft roles to really ensure that people are using their strengths, then those conversations are going to be much more positive and inspiring and motivating as well. And as a reminder, so when we use our strengths at work, and there's a few stats there listed on the screen, but there's sort of huge impact in just using our strengths every day, just 10 hours a week. We're much more productive, we're less likely to quit, we experience less stress, we're more likely to engage in work. So using our strengths really does have a big impact on lots of different factors for us at work.
And I think, I don't believe this is on the slide, but even research done by the Corporate Leadership Council found that it's about a 35%-ish increase in performance when people focus on their strengths, and that's as opposed to about a 25% decrease in performance when you're focusing on the weaknesses.
Wow.
So there's real stats behind this. It's not just all soft and fluffy and being nice. There's real performance impacts on focusing on strengths. And there's definitely quite a compelling case to be had for the benefits and impacts of motivating performance and by leveraging strengths. So I think maybe now is a good time to talk about those key foundations for performance motivation that we've identified at Bailey and French based on our research and experience. And here are the first 3 on this slide.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So there are 6 in total foundations to performance motivation according to the research. And these have all been found to increase performance, engagement, productivity and well-being, as it says on the slides there. So they're really important concepts to keep at the forefront of our minds. So I'm just going to run through them briefly. So the first one looks at respect. And this really sort of focuses on methods that develop our own self and other awareness to enhance that feeling of respect across teams and departments and organisations as a whole as well. Respect really relates to having high quality connections here. It allows us to engage honestly and openly with others and treats each other with a mutual positive regard as well. And when we feel respected, we feel happier, we feel more motivated to really sort of go all in and perform. So that's a really, really key aspect to performance motivation. The second one is clarity. This comes up a lot, I think, and is something that often is missed when looking at performance. It's actually having the clarity over what's expected of me, what's my unique contribution here, and that's really, really important to then actually know what motivates us and how to apply our strengths to our roles. We need that clarity in sort of a world of cognitive load at the moment. And clarity connects to sort of engagement and a sense of meaning and purpose as well. When we have a clear sense of our role, that leads to job and life satisfaction as well. So again, clarity as the second sort of foundation to performance motivation is a really key one here. The third one is strengths. Again, I've talked about strengths quite a bit, but again, that's around the concept of strengths, those things that we find energizing and enjoyable, and they are unique to us, and strengths are really connected to that flow state where we reach peak performance and peak experience. So using our strengths at work is very much related to performance motivation and as a key third foundation to this approach. We also have praise, and I think someone mentioned praise as their own motivator at the beginning of this webinar, so I'm linking back to that now. But this is really key. It focuses on exploring that sort of strengths-focused recognition and praise techniques that increase people's sense of achievement and motivation at work. And I think recognizing and celebrating achievements really bolsters feelings of positivity. I'm sure we can all sort of think of a time where we've worked on something really hard and received praise. You know, you do feel really positive after receiving that feedback from others, knowing that you've done a good job. And when we experience those positive emotions, that also opens up new possibilities and ideas for future as well. So praise is another key one here. So the fifth foundation is growth, and where I'm talking through these fairly quickly. So again, please do pop any questions into the question box as I go through. But growth here is all about sort of evolving our thinking and conversations around our learning, our growth, and career progression as well. So our ability to grow in our role is so important for motivation and is very much linked to our mindset as well. And I don't know if many of you have heard of the theory of growth mindset by Carol Dweck, but that really links in here in this foundation around growth, where we can all develop more of a growth mindset and develop our abilities and our strengths and our intelligence throughout our lives, and that enables us to grow, and that really feeds into performance motivation. So the last foundation of performance motivation looks at empowerment. And this is really exploring the barriers to empowerment and learning techniques to exercise autonomy successfully. So I think we all really value a feeling of sort of agency and autonomy and choice. We spoke about that earlier, and that really boosts our intrinsic motivation, helping us to perform at our best through that sort of internal drive and persevere in the face of those challenges and those barriers and blockages. So again, another key foundation to motivating performance.
So yeah, and apologies before my audio cut out for a little bit, but hopefully I'm back now. So we have outlined those those 6 foundations to motivate performance, and I'm not sure if you mentioned this whilst I dropped out briefly, but it's important to note that these foundations, they build on one another. So it's hard to grow and to thrive in a role if you don't have those first 4 foundations of respect, clarity, strengths, and praise covered first. So that's a really important part of this model or this perspective of performance motivation. Perhaps now is a good opportunity to talk through a few probing questions that can help our audience, I guess, consider the extent to which they might see these foundations reflected within their organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So pop your comments and thoughts in the question box as well, or perhaps take these questions away to have a think and reflect on in terms of your current approach. But we thought we'd just pop a few questions. So I won't read them all out, but I will just pop them up on the screen for you to have a think of, and perhaps jot down any of your initial thoughts, if you can, if you have a paper and pen handy. But just again, a few sort of reflection questions to get you thinking about your own approach and how to really embed these foundations of performance motivation into your work.
Yeah, they're definitely good questions to start reflecting on those performance motivation foundations. And we have a question in the question and answer box about what if someone's intrinsic motivation lies in areas outside of work? How do we motivate that person? That's a really good question, and that's quite a meaty one. I think we could probably have a webinar just on that in and of itself. I think it's around, part of it is that reflection piece, and there's a little bit of that purpose piece as well that we touched upon earlier. Finding ways or finding opportunities to further strengthen, or work in areas of strength, finding ways to apply strengths if you know what they are for you, to see how you can leverage that in the workplace or in your role is certainly something that does energize people. It may give an opportunity to really reflect around, what it is that they receive from work. Is it purely just a monetary value? And if they're not having that motivation or purpose or any of those intrinsic things being triggered, how sustainable is that for an individual? That's kind of almost like a coaching question. What's that person actually there for? What are they doing in that role? If it's not intrinsically motivated, and how can they maybe bring more of that human element of them, their strengths to it, to maybe counteract or to counterbalance. But I definitely think that's quite a deep question that we could certainly unpack much further.
Yeah, that's a great question. We've had another question asking, how do you truly motivate during times of change fatigue, which I think is another great one. I'm happy to sort of take a stab, and Dane, please do add anything. But I think, there's always so much change, and truly ensuring that people are kept motivated during those times are really can be challenging. I think it comes down to just that sort of open and honest communication and that focus on strengths, to try and keep people energized and focused on what they truly enjoy during times of change, especially. So I think that use of strengths is so important, and then changing that tone around the conversations around change as well, to try and sort of reframe it in a way into perhaps a bit more of a learning or positive slant. Don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, Dane.
Yeah, the human connection is really important as well. So making sure that you've got the support and the connections, whether that's from colleagues or from leadership teams, but to be able to really work together as a group helps build up that resilience to change. It allows people to apply their skills, their attributes, their strengths in different ways. But I guess it's like the murmuration of starlings and Brighton Pier. You're all kind of adapting and changing direction, but you're doing it as a group. And you have a sense of space and purpose of what you contribute to the team or to the organization, but so do those around you. That has a massive difference because it doesn't feel so isolating. And also then, I think there's a bit of that self-care element as well. Change fatigue, or just fatigue in general, is understanding what then energizes you, whether that's inside or outside of work. So for me, a lot of what I do on a day-to-day basis, I find cognitively quite draining, and that could become quite effortful after some time. But for me, I know that gaming is a really energizing thing for me, because it's almost like a sense of escapism. So if I can find, half an hour or something on a weekend to be able to do that, that has a massively energizing impact for me. And that's because I'm very self-aware as to what gives and what drains that energy. So I think there's a few pieces around staying motivated during, change fatigue and just challenging times in general.
Yeah, thank you. That's a nice example. Um, I'm just conscious of time, so I think we wanted to give a few tips as well. Dana, didn't know whether you wanted to introduce the next slide.
Yeah, perfect. It's actually great timing as we close out the session. I think it's good to focus on perhaps some practical implementation tips across each of those 6 areas of performance motivation that our audience may find useful. These tips are focused on addressing 2 needs. So we have in that sort of middle column a more immediate responsive need, and on the right-hand side, a longer term, more proactive perspective. And this, I think, is quite a nice dynamic to help people focus on the most pressing opportunities, whether that's something happening at the moment for them or for their teams and their organizations, or perhaps you're making plans for more longer term change. We just thought it would be really nice to be able to give some really straightforward tips for the audience. And of course, you can find out more information about these on our website as well. But I think it's just take a moment and be interested to see from the audience if there's any there that particularly resonate or that you see happening at the moment. Perhaps you're already doing some of these tips. It'd be great to get a sense from those who are attending, what resonates with you.
Yeah, please do pop your initial thoughts, comments in the question box. And we've sort of aligned these tips to the 6 foundations of performance motivation. And hopefully these are helpful for you to take away in terms of both the immediate and long-term response to really sort of harness these 6 different areas. I really like the empowerment and the growth sort of tips. I think I'm going to take a few away for myself to start trying to put these in action. Actually.
Yeah. I think with growth there, that focus on strengths-based development within people's roles, but I think also in response to change in the way that the nature of business and organisations are at the moment, it's also looking across functions where possible, what opportunities are there for cross collaboration. Whether we have opportunities for internal vacancies, secondments, that isn't always done, and it's not always necessarily front of mind for organisations. But I think doing more with less is something that I'm hearing clients talking about, people feeling stretched, perhaps budgets or people are being squeezed. So looking for ways to be able to leverage strengths and capabilities across an organization. I mean, we had an example of that just last week, where one of our consultants in the learning team has volunteered to sort of lend a hand in the recruitment side of the business because they've got some strengths there, and we see, and there's an opportunity for them to get involved and to succeed, beyond perhaps the traditional definition of a role. And I think that's just a fantastic example of growth mindset. So there's lots of different ways that we can think about these things, and hopefully some of these tips are inspiring the thoughts there of our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got a few comments in the question box around that strength discovery piece, and that seems to be standing out for quite a lot of you. And I think it's quite difficult to pinpoint actually what your strengths are unless you take some time to reflect and discover them. So that's a really key step to firstly actually understand your strengths and gain that self-awareness before then actually trying to put them in place and make use of them. So that strengths discovery is definitely a key part of the whole approach.
Absolutely. And I think that takes us up to the end of the webinar session this afternoon. We'll obviously stay online for a little bit longer just to take any last minute questions or comments that our audience may have. But if you don't, and you've hopefully found this session interesting, there's a lot to talk about to cram in even in just a 45-minute session. But I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today, and your comments and engagement through the session has been, really valuable. I hope those who perhaps didn't submit any questions or comments still found this webinar interesting and useful, and maybe it gives you some ideas about exploring performance motivation within your teams and organization more broadly. Emily, thank you for joining us today as well.
No, thank you. It's been a pleasure. Great to talk about the topic, and definitely will be, as I said, taking a few of these tips away for myself. So yeah, really nice to be involved.
Absolutely. And for those in the audience, please do get in touch with us if you'd like any more information about what we've covered today. And don't forget, our latest news and resources are available on our website. And you could also follow us on LinkedIn and register for our newsletters so that you're the first to hear about any future events, new activities and solutions that we're launching in the future. But thank you once again for those who joined us. We'll stay on the line for just a few more minutes to see if there's any other questions that come through. Otherwise, have a great day.
Yeah, thank you all. We do have a question about the recording of the webinar, how to access that. So I believe that will be uploaded on our YouTube. Is that right, Dane?
Correct. Yes, yeah. Our YouTube channel. And for those who missed the question at the beginning of the session, our video will have closed captions available as well. So apologies, they're not in the live session, but our recordings will have closed captions available.
Yeah, good question. Thank you. Okay, I don't think we have any questions, but I can hang on a few more seconds just to see if anyone has any other questions at all. We'd be happy to answer them at this stage. So we do have another question come in. What would be your response to a view that social media and influencer culture via personal electric devices has been more responsible for driving personal motivation as opposed to a messaging of the past that would be more communal in nature prior? Wow, that's a good question. I feel like, again, we could probably spend a long time discussing that. Dane, did you have any initial thoughts on that question?
That's a big question. I'd like to maybe understand a little bit more about where that's coming from. I wonder perhaps there's a generational thing in that as well. So in terms of how much that personal motivation is driven for people's across the generations, I'm not sure. I'm terrible at social media, I must admit, so I don't get a lot of that kind of influencer impression for me. So what that would do is perhaps different to people of younger generations where they are more connected. I think it definitely has an impact. I think that definitely has pressures back in the workplace as well, in terms of what people expect from work and what workplaces are offering, and the pressures that creates, particularly around things like flexible working and working from home and remote working. The pandemic obviously shifted that a lot as well. But I think you need to have a balanced approach and make sure that you're bringing all people along. So sometimes you see organizations kind of take a little bit of that social media and influencer approach, but take it internally and take ownership for it. So you see like Yammer groups being created within organizations, and they create their own sense of social culture online, but it's around the organization itself, and it's a little bit more inclusive because it's woven into the systems and the platforms that people use to communicate at work. But yeah, I think off the top of my head, that's probably my initial thoughts around it.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. again, we've done a bit of work previously around working with Gen Z employees, and actually there is a difference in sort of how you know, in different generations, how those approaches to work and the impact of social media and all of that as well. So I think that that recording is also available, I believe. I will double check that, but that was an interesting conversation, and yeah, there's definitely impact there. But again, I'm actually not very much on social media as well, so I yeah, have sort of limited knowledge on that, I guess. So I don't think we have any other questions in, but if anything comes up after this webinar, please do get in touch via our LinkedIn or via our website or email. We love to hear from you and think about these questions as well. So please do get in touch if you have any other thoughts or questions after today.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.